Ladies and gentlemen, we are back! Back for another episode of the Draxx Life podcast, where we'll chat about some of the weird and the wondrous. Let's get to the show. Alright, we're live. You see Bobby A in the back. His hair is starting to untangle.
It's gonna
like
puff out.
Rapunzel. Letting her locks down. So
I haven't thought about that story in a long time. Rapunzel.
Now, I'm looking at the background. Again,
Yeah.
Not to hate, but to use the joke, looking like a Chinaman's apartment.
Yeah.
That joke came from someone who's from China, Henry Chan.
Yeah.
But I see flowers. I see vegetation in the background.
Yeah.
It is Valentine's Day.
So I'm a festive guy. So I like to have some kind of decoration, you know what I'm saying? But I have flowers.
You are.
They're real, by the way. They're real. You can smell them.
Now, did you go to a floral shop, or did you get this at like your nearest bodega?
No, I just bought them when I left work. You know where it is. There's a flower section.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. I bought it.
One-stop shopping.
Yeah, I was leaving work, and I just picked them up. This is one day only. So if they come down from downstairs, I might gift it to one of the Golden Girls. I probably will.
You should.
I will.
Brighten her day.
Yeah.
I love how my background is a white wall and yours is this.
It's like you can see it's a traveling Tupperware. There's the laundry room in the back.
I dig it.
Which anyone can enter at any time. That's what I was trying to tell you before. And anyone can come downstairs and access that. I can't stop them. That's why I always have to stay clothed. I can't sit in a robe and boxers. You know what I'm saying? I always have to have clothes on.
Well, yeah. I mean, hey, they're going to be in for a show, I guess, in that case.
Yeah, at least they respect it at nighttime. At nighttime, there's no entry. But once they get home from work, they can anything can happen at any time.
Yeah, it keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's actually now that I think about it, it's more of a discipline thing because I can't just be sitting around you know what I'm saying, rolling. It keeps you honest. That's the word.
It's actually probably a good thing. If you think about it, I've heard people make the same argument for when having a significant other.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's when you're by yourself, it's pretty easy just to be let's say if you play video games, just to spend a whole day playing
all
video
day
games
long in your shorts. Yeah.
But when you have other people around, you're like, all right, I kind of want to be doing that, but I also don't want to look like that.
That's exactly how I feel.
So I'm going to do the thing I really don't want to do, which is whatever that thing is, work or doing whatever.
Or cleaning up and around, which clearly I have a lot of to do.
Dude, it's a good point you brought up last week of being by yourself versus having people around. And this is we didn't talk about that, but this is one of those things where having people in your life, it does kind of force you to be ideally a little bit better version of yourself than, dude, if no one was going to come into your house ever, it's dishes pile up. You don't clean one week.
It gets dirty. It gets dark too. Yeah, mentally, exactly.
The outside becomes a version of the inside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. And you said the same thing. The hermit lifestyle is not good just for your overall emotional, mental, and physical health. Not at all. Yeah.
But yeah, today, so we don't have Joe with us. We were going to talk about sports betting, which I really want to talk about because
we need him though. Yeah.
Yeah, because you two guys are really into sports. I think you picked up on the trend or the. There was a time in the U.S. where you couldn't bet unless you were betting in Vegas or maybe Atlantic City.
It was
now
illegal. Yeah, you're right. It was illegal, except in the casinos in Vegas and Atlantic City.
Yeah, I mean, think about all the mob movies that are around sports betting. We've just legalized and eliminated that whole industry.
The bookies are done. Yeah.
But I want to talk about that because the more I see it, the more I have an opinion about it. But we'll wait till Joe jumps in for that one. So today I've been watching I've been listening to Ari Shaffir's new podcast. So he has a podcast where he's been essentially just interviewing comedians and like specifically talking about like their travels, which is a pretty cool thing because it's just like listening to people who you might know or might not know, but like their experience traveling to like a different country. And I know you
Mm-hmm.
and I both did study abroad.
Mm-hmm.
We spend time with people from, other walks of life. So I kind of wanted to just like focus on that. Like, what is your experience like spending time being around people who have like a vastly different worldview or just upbringing, and like how like you take that for granted, like you assume everyone grew up watching like Saturday morning cartoons and eating cereal, and it's like
Yeah.
you could be talking to someone and it's like that is so far removed from their childhood. um, Even if it's like another Western country like in Europe, right, where you're like we get along, our humor is the same, but really there's a lot that's different. So maybe we could just kind of riff on that and like the good and the bad of kind of like exposing yourself to like different worldviews and whatnot.
Yeah, I think it's mostly good because it's always good to learn, educate yourself about other cultures and traditions and heritage. And there's three main points in my life where I experienced this. So when I was in high school, they took us one summer after classes ended. There was about 50 students with like four other professors, and we all took a trip to Europe. Like it wasn't backpacking. We had like a coach bus,
Yeah.
and we hit up Nice in France. We hit up Paris. We hit up uh, Madrid, Barcelona. We went to Florence. We went to Rome. So we did Western Europe basically.
That's cool.
Nothing in Scandinavia, no UK. It was just Western Europe. So Portugal, Spain, France, um, uh, Germany, like that on the west side.
Okay.
So, but at that time there was no cell phones. This was like I would say 2002. So it's before I didn't even own a cell phone at that point. So you had to take photos with like an actual like camera.
Yeah.
And so I would send postcards back to my family. Yeah, actually imagine actually writing out the postcard and sticking it in the mailbox. It was like that era. So
Which
it
is
was
crazy if you think about it. It's like there was a time where if you traveled like that, you weren't going to see the people who you were close to until you got back.
there's
Now you
no
could
way to
message,
even
FaceTime. It's as
uh-huh.
if you never left.
Right, exactly. You couldn't even communicate. There was no way unless you bought a calling card and went to a payphone
Yeah.
and like went to like a because I remember in Europe they have in the hotels we were staying, all of them had like this phone booth. It wasn't like the New York City phone booths that we know.
Yeah.
It was like a phone room with just phones, and constantly there were tons of people there sitting down. It was like a telemarketing job. That's what it looked like. And I used a calling card to call home just to check in. Yeah, we're good, because they were worried about you.
Yeah, of course.
There, I was like, yeah, we're good. Tomorrow we're going to go to Munich. We're taking the bus and we're driving to Munich, and we're going to explore that. But I did get to learn. It forces you to learn about the culture of everything. And now that trip, I didn't really communicate with the actual people, the natives
Yeah.
there. So then the second thing it was when I actually studied abroad, and you could share the same experience. That's when I was independent. You had your phone, I had a computer, I had everything, and you were studying. And that's when you immersed yourself, and you were free to travel if you wanted to take a vacation, because my classes were only Monday through Wednesday. So I stacked all my classes on 3 days. So I had a 4 day weekend every weekend.
Yeah.
So you can travel. I lived in Florence, if the audience knows, on Via Guido Monaco, which is by Santa Maria Novella, which is the main train station hub. It's basically like Penn Station.
Oh, perfect.
That
So you were right there.
I was walking distance from the Florence Penn Station. It's called Santa Maria Novella. So I would take a train. I would go to Venice, go to Torino, go to Rome. If you wanted to go to Napoli, that's when we took a car. If you
Hmm.
obviously if you go into another country, That's where you know Ryanair, right? The cheap
Yeah.
airline. We would
Mhm.
use Ryanair, which was a little dodgy, by the way, but it was affordable.
Yeah, and you're not
And
going far, so you're not in the air for that long, like
right,
an hour, 2 hours maybe.
oh, all short flights, and that's when I went to like Madrid, Sevilla, Barcelona. Then that's when I went to like a little bit up north, like Sweden. Some people were going to Sweden, and where else did I go? Oh yeah, Paris. When and the good thing about NYU, that's why I'm rocking the NYU shirt right now. You see that? The Bobcat. That's their name. That's the era where I had the shirt.
Oh,
And
nice.
um, the
You
cool
still
thing about
you still have the shirt.
yeah, this shirt
That's crazy.
is 19 years old, and it's a collector's item now. It's called I'll leave that story for another day. It's the Tear It Up shirt, and there's a story behind it. It's sports related. I could probably tell that on my channel because it's all sports focused.
There you go.
Basically, they would hand out these shirts to the student section, the fans, when you would attend sporting events at NYU. But NYU is not a real big sports school, so there was only like imagine a student section and there's only like 25 people there. No one cared except for me and a select other few. But it was fun though because everyone knew who we are. The team knew who the student section was. The referees knew who we were. We got banned from the stadium. Did I ever tell you
No,
that
no,
story?
no.
No,
You got
because we were.
banned from the like,
Yeah.
permanently banned, or you just got kicked out in one game?
No, we got permanently banned. So fuck it, I'll tell the story.
Yeah, yeah,
So
I
yeah,
never heard this.
yeah. So there's one game in particular, and once again, this is before social media. So if you wanted to get dirt on the other team and the referees, you had to do some serious investigation. The internet was around, but there was no social media, so you couldn't see their lives.
Okay.
So we had one guy, I'm not going to say his name, he was always investigating the players on the other team, where they came from, what
But
their
for what
parent with.
purpose? Were you betting,
Well,
or
to no, for the
were you
purpose.
running like a syndicate?
No, that's funny, but for the purpose of creating songs and chants to mock them.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so
So you're playing psychological
yeah,
warfare.
yeah. So there was a guy. He was like that guy's number 14's parents just got divorced.
Oh,
Let's make fun of him for that. Yeah, like stuff like get
horrible.
in his head. It's terrible. That's why we got banned. And so we,
But it's like
eh,
straight out of a movie. Like that is literally
yeah,
from like a Lampoon movie or something.
yeah, we would dig up the most personal insults and sing about them in the student section. But like when he got the ball, whatever sport, volleyball, basketball. What else did we attend? I think those were the only ones I went to.
So were
And
you just
soccer.
part
Those
of the
three.
group, or were you the ringleader?
I was one of the main guys. Yeah,
This is kind of up your alley.
I was
You
one of
are
the
a
main
digger.
guys. Yeah, I wouldn't say there was one main guy. I would say there was a core four, and I was in it. There was four of them. I'm not gonna expose them.
This was the beginning of the
Yeah,
end for Robert Avery.
and yeah,
His law career was already spiraling out of
yeah.
existence.
I bet you if you contacted Cole Sports Center, which is on it's on West Third and what's that street? Is it on Bleecker? I
I
think
don't
it's
even know.
Bleecker.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's the NYU Sports Arena, and uh,
I see. I
it's
mean,
on Houston and Bleecker, I think. Yeah.
so it's not a football field, is it? Just what
No,
is
no,
it?
no, no. It's not a field.
Basketball.
It's just all the indoor sports. So
Okay, I was gonna say because like,
yeah,
do they even
swimming.
have football growing
No,
up? At like, they don't have a
no,
football team, right?
no football. There was baseball, but that wasn't sanctioned by the NCAA. It was just like a club team. Hockey was a club team. We didn't have an official hockey rink. We used Chelsea Piers.
So I have a
Um,
question, and maybe this is we can talk about this another time.
yeah,
But just while I'm thinking about it, 'cause we've diverted into sports.
yeah.
Um, Not my area, but like this is definitely a
We'll
good joke
get back to
question.
Florence in a
Yeah,
second.
but
Yeah,
like, so football, like, if are there in high school? I'm assuming all the high schools in New York have football teams. Yes,
high school, yes,
yes, but
but
do they? Because I mean, where? I know like in Brooklyn and Queens, there's probably football fields. Like in Manhattan, where would they even practice?
Most of the outer borough high schools have a football team because there's space
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like in the NFL, like how many of the athletes are coming out of like urban environments?
Yeah, definitely urban environments, but not necessarily New York City. Collegiate athletics is almost non-existent in New York City
Interesting.
unless you're talking about um, like Queens, like St. John's University that has a big sports program, and Columbia, the Ivy, because it's Ivy League, so
Interesting.
they're Division 1, but they absolutely stink in every sport
Yeah, because I'm
except
wondering if you were
probably.
like if your son was like fantastic at high school football. It's like I wonder if people just leave New York for that purpose, like to go play out in like
Yeah, they'll
Iowa or something.
they'll send their child to a boarding school, so they'll live there. It'll be like being in college. You're living and playing and going to school somewhere that has like a storied, like
Yeah,
a
like a
big
lineage of
pedigree
yeah.
of churning out football players. Yeah,
Got it.
exactly.
Got it. Got it. Okay, so back to Florence.
Yeah. Wait, let me finish the
Yeah, yeah.
story.
Finish
I
your
was
story.
in bed. I was and then we would make fun of the referees too. um, get personal information because the program you see the names of the referees, and we created a
This is
hostile
ridiculous.
environment. We created a hostile environment, but it was good because it rattled the other team. It was good.
This
It
is
was
like
all, it's all part of the
ridiculous.
game, man.
This is
It's
ridiculous.
listen, the game
This
is the
is the
game,
genesis
Corvo.
of your Twitter existence, your ex
Yeah,
existence.
exactly. And then one of I guess the athletic director came up to us one day and he was like, "You guys got to stop doing this." And then they, from now on, my legacy still continues at every NYU sports game that takes place in that arena, the indoor arena.
Okay.
They announce if anyone says anything derogatory about another player or an official, they will be removed from the stadium. They announce it before the game.
Yes,
I think it's
because they assume that most people do not do deep dive research into family turmoil.
yeah, we got personal, which I agree with you. That was a little too over the line. It was over the line. I would admit that because you can make you can make fun of someone for having a bad game. Keep it on the court. That's fine. Now we got personal. We
It
got
is kind of crazy. You don't think about with sports. It's like there's the game itself, but like there's like the psychological element of like you got to be able to focus and like if you're
yeah,
going
man.
through some turmoil in your life, like if you're a professional athlete, like you can't allow that to trickle into like the game you're playing. Like you got to be able to like compartmentalize that, put that away, deal with that breakup or that divorce when you get home and like
Yeah,
play. Which I mean, that's hard to do. Like, they're not robots; they're humans.
right.
Um,
Exactly. I think that's the part you would enjoy because
yeah,
it's like mental warfare. You would enjoy that part of it.
yeah. I think. I mean,
Yeah,
I think most people don't think about it. It's like you have to be kind of mentally tough to play a professional sport. People are watching
absolutely.
you. It's a live event. Like if you mess up, people are gonna boo you. That's like when I watched the Netflix Beckham
I saw
special,
that
which
as well. Yeah.
dude, I thought it was like really good. Like I don't follow soccer, and I thought like it was cool because it really focused a lot on professional soccer, professional football, and like
The
his
life
life,
of a footballer.
but
Yeah.
like the game and how you play it, what that looks like, and like dude, the mental toughness because when you screw up in Europe, again, full circle, you know, playing a game like soccer and like in Europe, talk about booing. Like if you mess up, it is completely above board to just like people go in on you. Like people throw stuff on the field. I think it's like not out of the realm of like what's normal. You know, you think people boo badly at like a football game. It's not the it's a whole different level
Oh,
when you're playing like soccer live professionally in other countries. So you better be mentally tough because that is going to be hard to just be
mm-hmm.
playing a game and then you're focusing on the game and then also every thousands of people are hating you in this moment and want you to die. Like,
Oh, millions around the
yeah,
world watching.
I
Yeah.
couldn't deal with that kind of stress. I don't think.
Yeah, high pressure, high pressure. That's why like taking a penalty kick, like Beckham when he got sent off, you remember when he got
Yeah,
dismissed from the game and they made an effigy and they hung the effigy, like they hung the doll
behind right.
of Beckham in effigy. That's crazy.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Like we think,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, your heckling is nothing.
Yes.
European
All right.
heckling
So
is a
yeah, speaking of
different
that,
game.
yeah, that's you perfect segue
Yeah,
because the
because I have
last
a story too. Go ahead, keep
yeah,
going.
yeah. But the last point to land my story, and then I want to hear yours.
No, no, go ahead.
Um, Speaking exactly to that, you think what we did is bad? There was this girl, and I'm gonna expose her right now. I'll tell her name. Her name is Jennifer Tiss,
Oh,
and
thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Draxx Life podcast. As you can see, the headphones are on, so I just got done recording. And if you enjoyed the show, if you enjoyed listening to two madmen just speak nonsense, then please take a moment to hit like and subscribe. It definitely helps. But without further ado, I lead you back into the program. Hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Peace.
she was a writer for the NYU newspaper, the Washington Square News, I think, or no, the WSN is
I have no
public.
idea. Uh-huh.
It was some NYU publication. It was a school specific, and she wrote a story about she went to the game because she heard about us, and she wrote a story saying, "Oh, with these fans are just completely out of line. This is totally out of bounds what they're saying and doing, and they're embarrassing the school. Would they do this at Duke University?" Or say, like, she started naming. I was like, the shit that they're saying at Duke, which is one of always like historically probably a top 5 basketball team ever in the history of collegiate athletics, and their fan base are called the Cameron Crazies. You think what we say is bad? Go to a game at Duke and see what they're doing to the opposing team. So don't try to get all high and mighty and holier than thou. I'm getting worked. I'm working
I know
myself up
you're
now.
getting heated up,
Yeah.
man. You gotta
So
take your
don't.
shirt off. You're sweating.
Yeah. Don't try to tell me that we're some kind of like evil villains. Even though we did play that role, but we're not something that anyone else does. And to cite Duke as an example is just shows how little you know. So
Oh man.
she tried to come at us in the school newspaper, and we were like, no. So I commented because the article was online. I commented and I just went off under it, and no response, of course, because she knew I was right. But Jen Tiss, I know, and she can't say anything to me because I've spoken to her friends and I've told her to her face because she was kind of connected to my friend group as well. So
Just
I had friends that knew her.
one lesson, audience. If
Don't fuck with
if
me.
you cut Robert Avery in some way, that grudge will live on decades into the future. Be
Oh,
careful.
I'm surgical with this. I'm
She don't even
surgical.
remember you anymore. She has a kid, 3
Probably,
kids, and is, I don't
yeah,
know,
yeah. Which
deputy
fair enough.
director of something. And you're like, I'm gonna get you one day.
I'm
I'll
surgical with
remember.
it. Don't mess with me. Yeah, she's probably hasn't thought about me in 20 years.
Yeah, somehow you'll find a way to cut back and remind her.
I never forget. We never forget.
You got the memory of an elephant.
Yeah. But go. What's your?
Well, I was just thinking because I know, like, when I did study abroad in Rome, we might have been there at the same time. Honestly, I think, when did you graduate?
2007.
So you
I was
graduated a year before me. Okay,
I was in Florence in 2006.
so you graduated in 2007.
I graduated college in 2007. Yes.
Yeah, so I graduated in 2008, and I think we went on my junior year. I think that was the year you everyone went. So that would have been like 2007. Yeah. So when you were graduating, I went. So I went to Rome, and just to comment on sports, it was like I remember my group of people. So again, football, soccer is huge in Europe, right? Like, so there's soccer hooligans. There's people get fired up, and there's not necessarily the level of restraint that you see in like American sporting events. And I remember there was a soccer game. It was like a big game, and then a bunch of the guys that I lived with went. And like, dude, at a certain point, bottles get thrown. Like, you could walk out
Yeah, man.
seriously injured, and it wasn't like a uncommon occurrence. So it is a
Not
funny
at all.
thing. Like, dude, sports in America, they can get a little riled, but like right now, with Super Bowl, the Eagles won. They're having a parade today, and it's funny. Like, parades in Philly, there
I
could be
hate it.
problems. So everyone is like, geared up and ready to go just in case there is like some type of issue. But it's kind of like, it's funny. People be like, oh, that's crazy. But dude, in Europe, there's that, like, that's not uncommon. Like, they take sports really seriously. and it's like life or death.
Yeah, it's a like so that's to tie into the point of
Yeah,
this episode. You're right. One of the things that I've noticed about being abroad is um sports is not just entertainment. It's not just something you do on the weekends.
yeah.
They live with it. It's a daily lifestyle. So they take it. It's beyond serious. It becomes part of your identity. It's who you are. It's kind of like Joe with the Giants.
Yes.
Like it's it becomes a fabric of what like who you identify as yourself.
Well, and it's a
It's
link
in your DNA.
generation to generation. Like,
Yeah,
you talk to
another good point.
Birchman,
Yeah.
right? I think that was the interesting thing of like with soccer in particular. Like in a lot of Europe, in a lot of countries, not even European countries, like we have teams. The teams are really much like state. Pretty much they're state oriented. If you live in a particular state, like you're gonna follow this particular sports team. What
Hmm.
I always thought was interesting, like you know, talking to Birchin is like for soccer, for example, it's like you have more club teams that are even smaller sections of geography, like not just like a state team or a country team. You might have like a city team or like
Multiple city teams. Yeah.
county team. And it's like how, if your father followed this team, you're following it. And then your kids are going to follow it. And there's just like a long line. There might be multiple generations of like fans for this team. And it's not like you just like the team. It's like it's your family's team, it's your county's team. And like that's like a kind of a cool thing, which you don't see it. There's parallels in the US, but I don't think that degree of heat and passion is there. Um,
No, you're right.
yeah.
That's an excellent point. I should have brought that up earlier. That's well done by you because it's not just it's not just being a fan. It's part of your lineage. It's part
Yeah.
of your family's history that you support this team. So to explain it better for the audience, it would be let's take New York City for an example. It would be as if Queens had their own team, Brooklyn had their own team, the Bronx, and if you were you can't be a fan of the Brooklyn team if you were born in Manhattan. But that's what happens in somewhere like Istanbul, where Berchan is. There's neighborhoods within Istanbul that have their own teams, and then they play each other, and it's just madness. You need riot police. You need gates. That's why some of the stands are gated off. So and
Yeah,
another
it's
thing,
crazy.
they're not allowed to sit with each other. You have to sit in totally different sections. If you're a fan of Berchan's team, Besiktas, you can't sit with the Fenerbahce team because you'll just fight each other. You
Yeah.
got to
And
sit in this. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
no, I was just gonna say it's like gangs.
Pretty much, it's like the
Right.
gangs of New York. Yeah.
And also like this is kind of how like you probably like worked out like tensions amongst like these different parts of these cities. Because the thing about sports, I always say, we've talked about this before. Like my view of sports is like essentially it was a safer way of like having battles and combats where like people didn't die, but they could compete. And like, dude, sports can get pretty violent. Like if you actually watch like close up any sport, basketball, like they throw elbows. It's like it's a physical activity. So like I kind of look at it in that way. It's like a way that someone figured out how to like, all right, these groups in this city, they sometimes don't get along for X reasons. Let's go have them battle it out. And like we can also all cheer. But we're kind of living through like, I want to beat the shit out of you, this other part of the city for whatever reason. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to have my champions do it on the battlefield, which is the
Yeah.
soccer field.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, I like that. You know what they have a name for those type of fans. They're called the ultras.
Oh, is that what they're called?
That's what they're called. Yeah.
Interesting.
So
So go ahead. No, I was
no.
gonna.
So I have a question for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you were living in Italy, how did they receive you as an American?
Yeah, okay, perfect. I
Yeah.
wanted
Yeah.
to kind of
Yeah.
segue into this.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm gonna use Europe and broadly because so I did the same thing. Like you're in Europe, it's so easy to travel around, right? Once you're in one country. So like when I did my study abroad, we hit maybe like 6 or 7 other European countries, and then in Italy we moved around. So I went to Florence as well. We went to like Venice, a variety of places, Milan. So for me, for the
Hmm.
most part, I did not have any. So one, I went to, and maybe you did the same thing. I went to like what they call like the American University of Rome. So it's an international university. So you're going to engage with Italians, but like you're going to have people from all over the world. So like that's one thing. Um, so you're calibrated differently. I did not feel really any. I didn't feel like I was treated differently, but that's for a couple reasons, and maybe this will tie into other things. Like, I don't think when I travel, I kind of like consciously try to travel like incognito. So like, I don't know, like there is like the American stereotype when traveling, and in Rome, like you did, there were parts of like the city of Rome where like tourists would go, and like they were very like American. There was the connotation of like, if you want to see Americans, go here, and
Mm-hmm.
they're
Mm-hmm.
drinking, and like it's just where people went.
Yeah.
So for me, like things were like I tried to like blend in as much as possible. So like style wise, like people tend to dress up a little bit nicer in Europe than they're like a less casual. Like people dress like and they look kind of nice. So I try to like adopt certain behaviors that were like very similar. And then I try not to look like a tourist. Like I don't have a camera with me. I don't. I was living there, so like I'm not having like a big hiking backpack or any of that stuff. And I have Italian ancestry. So like if I don't speak,
Mm-hmm.
I'll blend in. And like people will come up to me and speak Italian, like assuming that I like live in the area.
All
So
right.
like if I'm quiet and I don't say anything and I'm just walking around, I was like treated as if I was like a Roman if I lived in the city. If I talk, obviously, you know, real quick that I'm American. But
Yeah.
like you, like I didn't know the language, so I'm not really engaging with too many
Right. Right.
people. So I kind of just blend in and moved around. So there was no real issue. And then like 2007, I'm trying to think in the world were we any wars at that time? Yeah, I mean, I guess we were in Afghanistan and Iraq at that time.
Yeah. Mhm.
So, but I think I was young enough that like I didn't pick up on any like subtle animosity or like anyone like saying any like anti like American or anyone who treated me like because I was American. I don't think I really ever had that experience or that feeling. Maybe if I was to do it all over again, like if I was in college and I was doing study abroad now, maybe there would be a little bit of a difference. Um, but yeah, I never felt like I was treated differently. But also, I try to be very respectful, and I try to not be like a horse's ass, which like a lot of Americans when they travel, they're just like they give us a bad name and they put a kind of like a target on their back, right? Like
Yeah.
getting wasted and acting like a college kid when you're in like one of the older cities in the world, like it's fair if people are like this is dumbass American.
Mm-hmm.
So I like try to like not add any like animosity to myself. So I don't know. What about you?
Okay. In I think in Italy, I was treated very similar. I was kind of like blending in. I was focused on that, so like you, that's similar. It was conscious
Yeah.
decision to make because other people weren't like that. There's you had there was this one Irish pub in all of Florence. It's called Lion's Fountain.
Hmm.
It's still there today.
Yeah, we had
I
Scholars Lounge, which was also an Irish pub in
nice.
Rome, which everyone went to. But go ahead.
That's awesome. And that's when you knew if especially the locals, it's like if you want to pick up an American man or woman, you go to
Yeah.
Lion's Fountain. But like you said, I didn't like that behavior of I'm gonna go and get and have like 15 pints and then act like a jackass. And no, I never did that. I wanted to feel the streets of Europe. I wanted to
Yes.
blend in. So
Exactly.
and that's why I think I was well received. Also because like I think I'm just a charming person. So there, not to be arrogant, but I was like,
No.
I'm sorry, all the Italians, even though I didn't know Italian, they appreciated that because I was taking an Italian language course there.
So did I. Yep.
Yeah, and I was when you at least attempt to try, they were like, all right, you can speak English. I know you're American because most of them knew, especially in Florence and Rome,
Yeah.
a lot of them know English. But at least when you try, when you show the effort to try, that's they appreciated that.
Yeah. I mean, I also feel like, and this is traveling in general. So like I would say if I had to categorize, like my Europe travel, Europeans and Americans, like, we have a lot of similarity, like humor, for example. If you go watch like you know what I mean? Like, they'll get our humor, we get their humor for the most part. So it's not so different. Like, I also traveled in Asia, and that's a whole different ball game where like those people have a very different. I'm generalizing, but like Asia, like it's a different perspective because we're a Western country, so there's like underlying views and understandings that you probably couldn't even articulate, but like kind of like make you similar. So
Mhm.
like you kind of like automatically get along. Whereas in Asia, it's like that foundation is not there. So like I agree. Like for most part, traveling in Europe, as long as you exuded the right energy, I hate to like it's a new agey, but like if you're a hostile person and you come across hostile, you're gonna usually get hostility. If you're like a
Right.
calm person and like you exude like I'm not threatening, I'm here to learn, humility, you get that, right? Like that's been my experience pretty much anywhere you go in life, right? If you're like a hostile person, and some people are, and then they come back and they have all of these stories of problems they had. It's like a lot of times that's because you brought something with you, and then you just found other people who were also hostile and they're ready to go. So like that was my experience. But I lived with one guy who was from New Jersey, and he was like the
Wow.
like North Jersey. He's a stereotype of someone from New Jersey, like an Italian like Guido kind of like Jersey Shore kind of guy. Like
Yeah. Oh, I
that
know.
was he was that.
My
Like
cousin Vinny style.
it wasn't a stereotype. Like he was that. Watch
He
Jersey Shore. This guy he fit right in there. And there was another guy that kind of like we all hung out with who also
GTL
was from
baby.
that part, right?
Yeah.
And like they would go out and like this one guy I lived with, Kevin, he had that and like they get into problems with people. Like there would be confrontations. And I was like, why are we having like why are you having confrontations with people? So like he was bringing an energy that was like combative and like he got that in return. I remember him and the two guys like it was Mike and Kevin. Mike was a sweet guy, but when he was with Kevin, Kevin would like stir him up. And like Mike was also a guy that was dangerous. Like you would not want to have a confrontation with him,
He was
right?
a
But
big
he was
guy.
just like a strong, dangerous guy. Let's put it that way. I think he
All right.
wrestled like he was a tough, strong dude,
He's a
and
tough
was a
customer.
yeah, like type of person that like. But he was nice and he was peaceful. He was a cool guy. I've seen him since. But the other guy, Kevin, knew how to because they kind of came from the same upbringing, the same part of New Jersey. He could get him kind of riled up, and they'd get into like fights. And I'm like, why are you guys getting into fights? You are the stereotype that everyone makes fun of Americans for. Like you're getting hammered in Rome and you're like causing conflicts with people for no reason. And I remember they got in a fight and in Rome, like they just throw bottles at you. Like they ain't gonna fight you. They're just gonna start throwing beer bottles at you. Like
Yeah.
that's it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, no, we're not gonna fight with our fists. We're just gonna throw 50 bottles at you and you're gonna get hurt badly. So again, like I guess my point is, I think some people travel and they get into conflicts, and you always have to ask yourself. Unfortunately, it's like, were you bringing the ingredient that was going to create the conflict, or were you just like an innocent victim? And in some cases, you are an innocent victim, and in other cases, it's like you brought something with you, and then you just found the right people that ingredient mixes with, and you kind of helped instigate that issue. Like, did you ever have a conflict traveling anywhere overseas?
It's a good question. I'm trying to think. In No, not in a sense where it got dangerous or threatening, but I've definitely got into an argument when we were out.
Okay.
I think this was in Madrid. So Madrid is actually a lot like New York. Have you ever been to Madrid
No,
at all? No.
I
So
haven't. I haven't
Madrid,
been
I'll
to
explain.
Spain. I would love to go there.
You would love it. It's oh man. And because I'm not fluent in Spanish, but I can get by,
Yeah.
so that's helpful. Um, and when we were in Madrid one night, we were there's this club because another thing that was cool about living in Europe is studying abroad. So, like you said, I knew people in all these other cities because they were doing the NYU program in Madrid, the
Yeah.
NYU program in Paris. So I actually had people to like hang out and show me around in other cities.
Which is yeah, that's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
which is very, very like clutch. And so we went out one night. I believe it was some nightclub. It's something you and I would never do now. It was like, because in Europe the nightclub closes at like 8 in the morning, dude. It was, oh, we're going all night. It's
Yeah, they're
different.
definitely like people like to do the discoteca is like a thing in
Oh
Europe,
yeah,
man. They
big
enjoy
time
that.
house music, big house music, Spanish music. So in Madrid, that place had, I forget the name of it. I would suspect it's still open because the line was ridiculous. It looked like a very popular place, and um, we got into like it was like a confrontation over paying for the bill,
Yeah.
because I guess the customs are definitely different. Like going to a club in Manhattan, the way the waiting staff is different, the way the bouncer treats you. And I mean I kind of started it, of course, because I was in that era. I called the bouncer a cop out because he was like, this guy might be a little too messed up to come in here. And I pointed in his face, which I probably shouldn't have did. The guy was 3 times my size, and he was like, this guy, if you want this guy to come in here, now you're gonna have to grease me. So
Uh,
I was
yeah.
so, but I was the one who kicked it off. But otherwise, it was only, no. I think it was pretty well behaved. That's the only time I can remember. And then my friends were pulling me back. It's like, you're gonna try to fight this enormous man. You want this monstrous guy to take a big time shot at you? No.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, dude.
Put your head into concrete.
Yeah, exactly. So they saved me there. Um,
Yeah, I felt very like because I
but
remember in Rome.
otherwise, to answer your question, otherwise, no, it was all good. It was all good. Because
Yeah, because I'm trying to think where we lived. I don't know. So so Florence, like Rome, it's like you have the historic part, and then you also have more of like newer, like more residential where like Italians live. So where were you like in relation to
no,
like the historic locations?
I was right in the center of it. So
Okay.
the street is called Guido Monaco, and it's a good thing for me, is because, we were talking about this last week. I like walking everywhere,
Yeah.
so I could walk to the Arno, I could walk to the Ponte Vecchio bridge, which is the famous bridge that crosses over the Arno. In the middle of the city, I could walk to the Uffizi. I could walk to the Duomo. Everything
Yeah.
was
So
walking
you were right
distance.
in the
I
center
was in the
city,
center.
essentially.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
I could
Yeah.
walk to
So
the train. I could walk to the because the good thing about my school was we had an actual campus. You
yeah.
went
So did
to
we.
like American. Yeah, we had an actual campus. It was called Villa Natalia. It was a villa. It was a full
Oh.
villa that they
Okay.
had.
Cool.
It was awesome. It was beautiful.
Yeah, we were so where I stayed, and this is what I was gonna say is like so I was less in the so like Rome, it's like you have like the old city with the Colosseum, all of these like ancient places where you would
Hmm,
go to
hmm.
if you were gonna go on vacation. Like most people were gonna stay there, right? But we were like more in like a residential because you have all the population of Rome is I guess it's fairly large, right? But so there's the residential spots that are like in the I guess the new city. So we were there, but like sometimes we'd go drink like or go out. You're more in the old city, and we would walk like late at night. I would walk back, and it was kind of a hike, right? It'd be like kind of walking maybe like from Lower East Side to like Williamsburg. Like it's a walk. Like you're gonna go over a bridge. It's gonna take a little time, but it's doable. And like it was funny. Like I never felt like in danger. Like I think I felt more danger um, doing maybe that walk Lower East Side to Williamsburg at night than I felt like walking around late at night in Rome. So yeah, I mean that was always again I always felt like with danger, at least in Europe for the most part, my experience was just like you could get robbed, like you could get pickpocketed, but I kind of don't count that. Like I never got pickpocketed. I know people got robbed, and I'm like,
Yeah, so did I. Yeah.
never happened to me. I mean, you keep your be kind of smart, but even that, I just consider that like less violence and more like someone outfoxed you. You know what I mean? Like it's like
Yeah.
if you leave, if someone is able to like get their hand in your pocket and pull something out and run away, it sucks. I don't want that to happen. But like it's different than if someone pulls a knife on you and pushes you into like a dark corner and like threatens you with like bodily violence. It's like I never had that experience.
Yeah, yeah, neither did I. Mine was mostly fun, except for
Yeah.
that one incident. It was all fun. That's why I miss it. I think about that year all the time. All the
So
time. It
so I want to ask you this question, right? So when it comes to like, because you also, I know like for Saturdays you usually go
mhm,
watch soccer. So you're, New York City is kind of cool because it's such an international city. There's so many people who move there for work from all over the world.
mhm.
And like you go and you spend, Saturdays watching soccer with people cheering their teams and some of these people from all over the world.
Yeah.
So my question was just kind of like, now that we're older, so you're also more aware, like, do you identify like actual differences when you engage with people from like other countries? And I guess I mean is like, dude, you grew up in New York, so not only did you grow up in the U.S., you grew up in New York, so like how you see situations, how you look at like politics, how you look at like decisions are going to be very different than, let's say, someone who grew up in like Russia when the Soviet Union collapsed. Like their perspective, like their baseline foundation is going to be different.
Definitely.
They're going to interpret
Definitely.
things differently. So I'm just curious, like as you've gotten older and you've spent time with different people from different walks of life, like have you identified, oh, like Germans like look at things like this and like I doesn't, I get it, but it doesn't really make sense to me or etc. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. But that's why, like, I want to make a point on the Soviet Union. That's why I like Valentina Shevchenko and Sabalenka, the tennis player, because they grew up in when the Soviet Union was disbanding and collapsing. That's a hard,
Oh, yeah.
like, think about what they went through as children compared to other people.
Well, dude, think
That's
about anyone our age that's from that part of the world grew up at the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Like if
It's
you think
it's
about it.
insane. It's insane. But so yeah, so the cool thing about going to Legends or the basement football factory is I've met people, we're talking people from like Kenya, Uganda, Egypt, Morocco, every country in Europe you can think of. There's a lot of English people, mostly because it's football, but also a lot of South Americans. So because of the time difference, this is an interesting point. Because of the time difference, you'll see that African people, the like, and the Europeans, there's not really that many Australians. There's a couple. There's one guy I can remember. He's crazy, but a lot of Australians in a fun way. He's not dangerous, but he's just a nut. Uh, that guy's cool, and yeah, there's a guy I know from India as well. He's cool. They've all moved to, like you said, they've all moved to New York for work, but they go here because as all their life they've been following the sport.
Yeah.
So at during the morning you have the Eastern Hemisphere countries, and then at nighttime, because of the time difference, that's when you get the South Americans, Central Americans, Caribbean, then MLS, the American Soccer League, they'll all come in. So I go mostly in the morning. So I'm meeting people from mostly Europe, Africa, Russia, Asia, and it's been, I would say I've learned more about world culture at that place than I
Easily.
have in any class that I've ever taken, because you learn about their customs. There's one time there's a Korean guy that goes there all the time, and he goes, yo, I'm gonna go to this Korean restaurant. Do you guys like? It was me and a couple other friends, and there was like four of us. We went to a Korean restaurant afterwards. I was like, I would never know about this place.
Yeah.
I wasn't there, and while we were ordering, he was telling me about, well, this food is means some this in our culture. We usually do things this way. That's our heritage, and he would lay out like the traditional Korean meal and how you're supposed to eat, so like things like that. So when I gained all this knowledge, and then I'll talk to like another American about Korea, and I was like, no, that's actually not how you pronounce his name. It's actually pronounced this way, or that's not how you're supposed to hold. Like, you're supposed to, when you, because I would think of a Japanese thing, like when you're eating ramen, you're supposed to do it in a certain way. Like I could be wrong, but I think you're supposed to scoop the broth first in the because that's why they give you that little spoon. Scoop the broth, use the chopsticks, and then put what you want in the spoon, and then eat the spoon. But a lot of other people will just use the chopsticks and like slurp
Yeah.
up the noodles. So I think that's right. So like things like that, you pick up little cultural nuggets, and also they'll just tell you stories about, oh, in Seoul, this is our traditional like weekend. If I'm gonna go out and watch the game, this is how we get ready for it. This is what we sing during the game. This is how we celebrate the win, or what happens if we lose. And you learn so much about them as people, and then they become your friends
Well,
after
yeah.
it's yeah it's so cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I actually think that's probably the better way to learn about other cultures because, like, when you travel, unless you can speak the language, like, there is that barrier. Whereas, the one benefit of living in America, especially in a city, is that you don't have to go. It attracts, and then it also attracts people that can speak English, so they can really convey like their culture to you.
Mhm.
But what I was going to say is like it's in America. I guess there's like that's one of the downsides of America is that like we're a culture of cultures. So like if like I'm trying to
Mhm.
think like if this was the switch places, right? And you were in a soccer bar in Korea, like would you be able to say like this is how we do things in America?
Mm, the,
Or would you say like, well, I'm Puerto Rican, like this is how like my grandma would make this meal. But like you know what I mean? We can't say like, well, this is how you do things because we do things like you know what I mean? If I go
it's
to a
yeah.
pizzeria, we do it one way. If I go to like do this, you know what I mean? Like we adopt cultures.
That's a really good point.
I
Yeah.
always find it kind of like because you talk to someone who's from India, they can tell you like, well, and in different parts of India, they be like, well, we eat bread here. Oh,
Yeah.
well, we eat rice there. We eat this there. We do our tea this way. We do our tea that way, depending on the
Exactly.
region, right? Whereas in America, it's like we don't have that. Like we do coffee. Well, like we all do coffee. There's not really like, oh, we do coffee in like
Like
on the East Coast like this. We do coffee like this on
yeah,
the
I was
West
just gonna
Coast
say
like
that.
that.
Like
This doesn't exist.
yeah, no, you blew my mind. That's a really good point.
Like I kind of
We
envy that a
really
little
don't have
bit.
we don't have these like little intricate like methods of doing things like everywhere else in the world. Yeah, and especially even like you could get religion into it too. Like
Yeah.
at some because there's obviously there's Muslims that come and watch a game. They love there's certain the Morocco and Egypt team are really good. So anytime their players, it doesn't have to be like a World Cup where Morocco plays another team. They follow their players on the club teams. So there could be a Moroccan player that plays in London, and you see what I'm saying, and they follow that player. So they
Yeah, they're
like
gonna
that.
watch
They
wherever
watch
he's
that
playing
team.
at that time. Yeah,
Correct,
yeah, yeah, that
correct.
makes sense.
So, but then they'll say, I gotta leave for a second because I have to pray," and then stuff like that. So, um, you learn about, and it's so good learning about their culture and history. And that's another thing I want to say is, and I'm interested to hear your reaction to this.
Yeah, go ahead.
It also it's one of the few things like that place brings people all over the world together in a positive way because everyone there is having a good time. You're interacting, you're
Yeah.
socializing. It's not like geopolitics where everyone it's like trying to fend off one another or trying to make backdoor deals or anything like that, or just straight up going to war with each other. At that place, everyone is in a good mood, the energy is good, and you're just meeting and smile, everyone's smiling and laughing and cheering and getting to know one another from all corners of the planet.
Yeah, well, go ahead. What was your
Mm.
question though?
No, my question is, would that wouldn't you think that's a better environment to be in than if you were just following like a just that, let's say, the NBA, which is just almost strictly American, or the NFL,
Oh
sorry,
yeah.
the NFL, which is almost entirely like how many international players play in the NFL? There's probably like 5% of the league. 95% are all Americans.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, you think that most American sports are American sports.
Yeah.
Certain countries have adopted them, but like, there's no like long legacy, right? Like,
Mhm.
I do think that's one of the interesting things about like soccer in particular is that football.
Yeah.
is that so it is the number one sport in the world, and how like there is also this long history of like them like people having like their own internal brackets. So like, there are all the Italian teams that play each other, but also like there's this long history of like European teams playing each other, and then like a World Cup, these world teams, and it's like layers of connectedness. So like in the UK, the local teams playing brings the country together. And then it's like, how do we bring all of Europe together? Well, the European teams play each other, and then how do we bring the world together? Okay, well now all the teams play, and I think that is really cool because then you can go to any country in the world and find a place that has like all has soccer games on, and like you said, immediately you're kind of have like a commonality with all of these people, like, and it might even border it might you might not even have a shared language, but like you're all rooting for the same team, or like not even the same team. You see like a cool move or like a great play, you're like, oh, like you're gonna root for that.
And then you react to it. Yeah, no.
Yeah, so I think that's cool because like hockey, like Canada and the US, right? So like if you're in Canada, you could probably go find a place that has like an American hockey game on, and like
Yeah.
commonality.
Hmm.
Canadian could come here and find that commonality. But like soccer, all of the countries, you have
Can
like how many sports are like that? There's really not that many, I don't think.
It's only that UFC and I'm gonna say it, pro wrestling. You could drop me in the middle of
You think
like,
so?
yeah, oh yeah,
I don't know. I don't
yeah,
know pro wrestling that well.
yeah. You could drop me in the middle of like uh Croatia, like split Croatia, and I can go and watch a wrestling pay per view, and I'll make friends
Yeah, I
easily.
mean, okay, that's interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess that's the thing also with like with pro wrestling and with like the UFC is like those are like they're like entertainment companies,
Hmm.
right? So like the WWE and The Rock, but that doesn't necessarily mean in your country there's like a huge like local professional wrestling scene, right? You know what I mean? It's like watching a Hollywood movie, right? Like you just know. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Like I don't know. Like where soccer, it's like
Yeah.
you could go to like a far flung village in Africa who doesn't have a TV,
And
but
you
they
can
play soccer,
yeah, you can go find a pickup game and play in it. Yeah.
right? So they love the sport at the local level.
That's a
There's a
good You're
tradition
right
of
there.
it,
Yeah.
and then also like if they have TVs, they might follow the teams. Like UFC, it's like you might follow UFC and the fighters in the UFC, but that doesn't mean that like you follow like you have an MMA scene, like a local fighting community. You know what I mean? You just like it's UFC. It's like a big production, so you watch it. Um,
Yeah,
that to
you're
me is
right.
like the interesting thing about is like soccer kind of is that like you could be poor in some far flung desert village in Afghanistan, and you're gonna probably find like a local game of soccer going on. And
Yeah,
then if you give
no.
them TVs, they're gonna
Yeah,
probably start watching soccer live. You know what I mean?
exactly.
So like, I
No,
think that's the difference.
you're bang on there. You're right. So in that aspect, you're right. But I do think you're underestimating the local. Most countries, you're right. They don't have an independent wrestling scene like we have. Like we have friends that work in circuits
Yeah.
like that. But in places like Germany, France,
Well,
like
South
the
America.
big in South America, there's these new wrestlers that are coming from Chile now. The Mexico has lucha libre. We all know that.
Yeah,
Japan has an enormous pro wrestling scene. It's probably
that's
second
interesting.
to WWE. It's called New Japan Pro Wrestling. A lot of the wrestlers in WWE go there first to hone their skills
Ah,
and then come over to America because there's a little bit more money
yeah. I
here.
mean, I think that makes sense. I mean, it's like an
But you're right.
actor.
But it's not.
Go ahead.
Sorry to cut you. But
No, no, go ahead.
you're right in terms of just global. When you're talking about community and people that come together and make friends from
Yeah,
it, soccer is probably number one. It's
yeah.
not
It's like
probably. It
yeah.
is number one.
And I think sports, there's like a purity of sport, right? It's like there are these rules. We follow these rules, and like we don't need any accoutrements. Like we don't need any settings. We don't need any like special effects. Whereas like wrestling, again, we could just say theater then, right? Like
It's what it is. Yeah.
Because I mean, it is theater, right? Like their theater community is pretty much all. That's another. I mean, you could say that's the same thing. Like almost every culture has this idea of like humans pretending to be other humans and then putting on like a show together.
Hmm.
So again, that would be, I think, a commonality.
Yeah.
So like in the remaining time, I wanted to say like what are we kind of talked a lot about like similarities, but I'm curious if you can like identify like any differences where like someone you hung out with was from another country says something or expressed a thought or whatever. It was just like, yeah, like that's interesting. I don't know what could have put things, what variables came together for you to say that thought. And like I'll give you an example.
Hmm.
Like I remember, so I spent some time in India and throughout Southeast Asia and whatnot, but it was like interesting where I was like in a rural area and like the idea of like gods, like religion in our environment is like somewhat different, like than if you were to be in like Asia where there's still people who believe in like many gods and also like people and just like how they use the word is different. So I remember I kept seeing a picture of this guy like on the back of people's cars, like driving around this part of India everywhere. And I was just like, who's this guy with this white beard? And like, I remember I asked one of the kids I was with, and he was like, oh, this is like, that's a god. And like, I was like, okay, what do you mean? And like in that world, in that culture, he was like a very wealthy guy who had kind of like deified himself. And like, I guess this was like a thing where like I don't actually like we're using the same words, but I don't even think I understand clearly what you're articulating to me because we're using the words differently. Like because in our society, like that's just not possible. You can be very, very rich. You can be almost like a king, but like we wouldn't. It would almost be like sacrilegious, like whether you're like a religious person or not religious person. If Elon Musk were to say I'm a god, like people would just be like up in arms, whether they're an atheist or not. Like the idea of a man giving himself that, deifying himself,
Yeah, I see what
like
you're saying.
Romans used to do, like emperors would just be like it would offend you, especially Americans. It would like offend you at like a deep, like primordial level. But like this kid was like, oh yeah, he's a god, and it was just like that was one thing I was like, whoa, that's like very interesting because like that makes perfect sense for him. That kid, what he was saying, I was like, yeah. For me, I was like, that's like so weird. So that was an
Yeah.
example. Like, so you could be talking to someone else like who's from India and like, and you met them in New York and they say something and you're like, I don't really get how you would say that, but it's like because their whole worldview, that foundational layer, is like very different than like how you grew up. I don't know. That's an example.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I s- un- the one thing I would say, unfortunately for me, although I spent a lot of time with the people that were from each of these countries, but I would say the majority of my time was with other Americans there. So I wished I would have. One regret I do have is I wish I would have. There was an option where you can live with an Italian family
Yeah.
instead of living in like a building with all the other students. I wish I would have picked that. That would have been better. But
But what about
one,
like when you're go ahead, sorry.
yeah, yeah, I was good. So it's kind of a theme of what we've been talking about for weeks. The one thing that did strike me was the religious aspect of everything, in especially in Western, especially in Spain and Italy and Portugal. Um, because people like the going to mass was such an important thing, and I never really thought about it that way. Coming from growing up in New York City, there are people that take it seriously, but
Yeah.
this is a new the levels are completely different. Because going back to what we were saying before about the community, it's probably a heritage thing coming down all the way from generations of families that took this super seriously. So like when you go to like the Sistine Chapel and you see half of the people there crying because they're there, literally like falling to their knees and crying.
Hmm.
And I'm going to St. Peter's Basilica too, seeing what's that statue, the Mary statue with Jesus slumped
I don't know the
over.
name
Yeah,
of it, but
I don't know that.
I can picture it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know which one I'm talking about. That though it's a beautiful statue. And like just to see the awe on people's faces, that really struck me. I was like, dude, like this could be the most important moment in this person's life right now, being in that building. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like a pilgrimage.
that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I was listening to like again, I was saying like I started to listen to Ari Shafir's new podcast where he interviews people who've traveled. A lot of comedians, they start, some of them you can get these gigs that are overseas and you get kind of like a job and you get to travel. And like he kind of brought this similar question up because he was just traveling around with people where you go to different places and you just kind of find that like, people see things differently. Like, for example, you might see a stray cat, but like it's very rare in the US that you'll see like a stray dog. Like I very rarely. Like I don't even know if I've ever seen an actual stray dog. It's a rarity, right? Like
It's rare. It's very rare.
it's rare. I mean, it's very rare.
I've seen it though.
You'll see
That's rare.
stray cats, but like it's rare that you see a stray dog. They get picked up. Whereas if you go to parts of Asia, like you could come across a pack of wild dogs, right? And that's like a different thing how they view that,
Probably not good.
how versus we view. I mean, I was in Nepal. I went down, like I was staying in a hostel and I went down this one road and I was confronted by like 10 dogs. And like, dude, dogs are scary. Like
That's
if
what I'm gonna say. That's
you know
probably
what I mean,
not a good
I
situation
literally
to
started.
find
I said,
yourself in.
I'm going around. I'm turning around. That's their territory.
Yeah.
They're saying this is ours. I was like, all right, it's yours. Like you
Yeah.
don't think about that. So like that was one thing. Trying to think if there was another thing that he mentioned. Oh, this was the other thing. Like he was talking about how he was having like lunch or coffee with someone in France. I've never been to France,
Mhm.
and he got introduced to someone, and he, in that the natural course of that introduction, Ari asked him like, well, what do you do? And the guy kind of like snippety at him of like, oh, Americans, like you always ask what someone's doing, like what they do, like that's like most important thing. And like that's like one of those things that kind of made me think about this conversation we're having is like it is true, like America, like we do care about like your career, what you're doing, what you're achieving, and in a lot of money. Yeah, and in a lot of European countries, at least now, it's like how you live, right? Like you go and you have a long lunch. Like when I was in Italy, it
Yeah.
was weird. People were always
Precisely.
out and about, and I'm like, don't you have jobs? Aren't you working? They take siesta. They take these breaks, and that
Yep.
is like an American thing of like we care about what you do. It is a thing you ask people.
It's
Like
one
you
of the
just
first
do.
things you ask. Yeah.
What are you doing? What are you doing in New York? Oh, you're an actor. You're a musician. It's not about like what did you like. What do you like to do? It's like what do you do? Because that is who you are. So like I thought that was like an interesting because a lot of other countries that's just not. It's like I'm living. That's what I do. I live. Right. And I try to enjoy life.
Yeah. No, I like that because that made me think of something. So I would say, firstly, you'll find those experiences more when you're not in Europe. So let's say we lived in Africa or Asia, like you did, or if I lived in South America, I would have seen more of things that are just completely different. That would make me go like, I would never have seen
True.
this in this perspective. But in Western Europe, it's a lot, like you said, like a city, like growing up in a city like New York, like Madrid is not dissimilar. I'm telling you, Madrid is not so dissimilar from
Yeah.
New
Or
York.
if you lived in
Like,
Germany, like a German
yeah,
city,
exactly.
very
But
similar.
I will say, on a humorous note, um, you knew it was always going to come back to this, the ladies. And the ladies in Europe, completely different than America. They're like you said, they don't care about how much money is in your bank account, or for the most part, some of them do, or what you do for a living. They're more about if they're having fun, if they're laughing. They're very lower maintenance. Then you get. I'm not trying to stereotype Germans, but they're very direct and firm. So if they like you, they'll make it known. If they don't like you, they will make it known. So the way I interacted with females in Europe was very different than it is in America. That is another stark change that I.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, yeah. I think that's very interesting. Trying to think. Yeah, I mean, There's a meme I saw that I recently, and it was like a guy giving a gift to his wife, and it said like American wife, and he had like 10 gifts, and she was like kind of happy, okay. And then
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
and then it had like man giving gift to European wife, and it was like one gift, like a very humble gift, and she was like so happy. There,
Mm,
it was kind of showing the stereotype between like
yeah.
consumerism versus like real kind of joy and caring. I mean, that's
Yeah.
a good point. Like there are like a lot of, I think, differences very much so with like the interdynamics between like men and women. That's probably a big one when you travel.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah. That was a big change.
what was I
Also,
say?
um, I think European fashion is better than American fashion. I'll say
Oh
it right
yeah,
now,
I think
yeah,
that's 100%.
by miles clear. Yeah,
Oh
just
yeah, I mean,
not
yeah,
even just the fashion house designers, just the way people dress. Because I think we talked about this in one of the early episodes.
yeah.
In Europe, when you put your clothes on and step out the house, that's an art. That's an art piece. That's your demonstration of yourself, your artistic expression to the world. In America, it's not nowhere near that.
Well, and that's even change. I mean, I think that's something that's even more modern, right? Because like if you think about, it, if you look at pictures of people who dressed in America in the 1920s or the 30s or the
It was
40s,
closer to Europe. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
people
yeah.
wore suits. They wore a shirt. Like they wore a tie. They wore like if you watch Peaky Blinders, like men dressed like that in America. But there was a shift maybe in like I don't know the 60s. Because think about the 50s. The 50s is Mad Men, right? Guys are wearing suits
Yep.
everywhere. They're cutting the grass with a button down shirt on,
Hmm.
right? And then in like the 60s and onward, it became like comfort, like sweatpants. Like the sweatpants are like an invention of the
Hoodies,
80s, right?
hoodies. Yeah.
Um, so I think in Europe, you're right. Like people, even in like in Asia, like you'll see people who dress like in India, they dress nicely. Like they're wearing a button down shirt. They're wearing a jacket, right? It
Mhm.
might be covered in like dust or sand, right? But it's like you're dressed nicely. You present yourself well, and that's kind of like, yeah. I mean, I definitely noticed that. One thing that's interesting. I remember I had a conversation with this. No, sorry, but let me just tell a story real quick. So I remember I used to do this meetup
Go
in New
ahead.
York, and this lady was in the meetup, and she was an older lady, but she ran tours, and she was born and raised in France. And I remember I'd go to dinner at her house with some people, and like we were talking about this kind of similar conversation. And it was interesting because she had lived in New York. She'd traveled all over the world vigorously, like because she's running tours, she's doing all this stuff. And then she's from another country. And then she lived in America for like many, many years. She lived in New York for many, many years. And we were having a similar conversation. And I was like, well, what's the difference between like France and like America and stuff like that? And we had this like very like deep conversation. And then to summarize it, and this is kind of like my point, it's like she was like, this shows you like the difference in like cultures and like ways of thinking that you're not even aware of but are like part of you. She was like, French culture, she's like, the key word is sex. She said American culture, the key word is violence. And I thought that
Ooh,
was like very interesting because she
not
was
wrong.
like,
Not wrong.
well, let me add detail because, like,
Yeah.
she's like, at least in her time growing up, she's like, being raped was not an uncommon thing. It wasn't even like we didn't even use the word rape. Like, people were like sexually aggressive. Like, people had, you know, abortions because of like being taken advantage of. She was like, when I grew up, like most girls I knew, like they had sex at least once that they didn't want to have it. Um, and then she's like, so that's like, she's like, in my mind, when I think of like French culture, at least at this time, I'm not generalizing, this is her perspective, but she was like, we're like a sexually focused, that's part of our psychology. Like, that's how we think. Like, that's kind of like, that's in us. Right. Whereas in America, she's
Mm.
like, America's not that, but like violence is there, like aggression is there. And that's kind of part of like your psychology, whether you're aware of it or not. And then to cap off the story, I remember I was traveling in Nepal. I was doing a hike. And I remember I was like hiking on a plane, like just a plane. Like imagine a mountains you're hiking towards mountains and you're just in this plane and you're just crossing. So you can see like left, right, forward, back. And I remember I saw a guy in the distance and like we ended up passing each other and like briefly we're talking because what are you going to do if you're going to talk to people you see if you're like traveling through like a desert landscape essentially? And I was like, you're introducing yourself, and I said something to the effect of like, oh, I'm from America, and he said his words were literally, he's like, I knew that. He's like, you wear your country on you, and we left, and I like thought about that for a while. I was like, what does that even mean? And it's true. Like, I'm American. Like, people are gonna see me, and for the most part, like whether there's some quality of America that lives inside of me and all around me, and that I carry with me wherever I go. I don't know
Yeah.
what those qualities are. It's part of that programming of like maybe freedom. Maybe there's a desire, like we don't bend the knee type of mentality. Like that's
Yeah.
in you, and like other countries have that. So from her perspective, like French being part of it was like sexuality to an almost like dangerous level was like part of their like psychology. And I just thought that was really interesting. And I think a
No.
lot of countries have that, whatever that thing is.
Yeah. No. I see what you're saying. That's very interesting. I didn't think it was going to go down that road, though.
Oh yeah,
I
when she
know.
said it, I was like, "Whoa,"
Yeah.
because she was like confiding. I was like, that's kind of
Yeah.
scary." But
But
like,
that's sad. That's sad. But I
yeah,
was thinking about the cool part of French sexuality. Look at the things that they've invented in terms of intimacy. We call it a French kiss. We call it a menage a trois
sure. But think about,
everywhere in the
yeah,
world. And it's, yeah, and they invented, there's Bill Maher has a good joke about
I don't think they
France.
invented it. I think we just have the
I
word to
know,
describe it. I'm pretty sure the
but it's
Greeks were doing
associated
that a
with it.
long time
Yeah,
ago.
fair. No,
Go ahead, go ahead.
I'm not saying they
Yeah,
invented it.
I'm kidding.
I'm
I'm kidding. But go ahead.
saying that even
It's
in
likened to that
America,
culture. Yeah,
it's associated with
yeah.
French culture. So even that just tells you everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, but like any quality taken to its extreme, there is a dark side of it. Think about even in America, like,
Liaison dangereux too.
right,
That's another one.
if you're like, if you're possessed by like sexual energy, right? Like, think about that. How many men in our society have fallen due to an overabundance of that energy in them? Essentially, most of the scandals in America are tied to that, right? So there's like anything else, like there's the positive, but like if that is like an extreme part of your psychology, like that there's an unquenchable desire that can lead towards bad things. Just like if you came from a society that greed or the love of money was like, love of money is not a bad thing because it can stimulate like invention.
Yeah, I was just, yeah, you said it.
But if that can never be satisfied, then it's like, well, that can lead you down immensely dark roads. That's how I look at it, at least.
Yeah, no, there's, I would say that that's a big difference from being living abroad. If there was less money focus, definitely abroad. To tie this up,
Yeah.
people didn't really care what I did for a living. They just wanted to get to know you as a person. And if you were fun, like if you were cool to be around and you could have a good conversation and everyone was having fun, that's what they were, that's what mattered more than the first question is, oh, what's your name? Then the next question is, what do you
Yeah.
do?
Well, and that's also like the nice part about traveling is that you are an anomaly. So just the fact that you're from a different part of the world, it's like if you were in college and then there's the token guy in your class that's from, I don't know, Yugoslavia. Just the fact that he's from Yugoslavia is like, it gives him an aura of mystery that people are going to want to like maybe get to know or experience. That's like multiplied when you go to like when you're in another country who doesn't see a lot of Americans. Like you, if we went to like Egypt, well maybe not Egypt because they get a lot of tourists, but like if we went to some eclectic South American country, people are gonna want to talk to you just because it's like you're American. It's like, oh, you must
Mhm.
be from New York, right? Like even if you were from Ohio, it's like New York City, right? Like because in their mind, like these are things that they see on TV and that they like find very interesting.
Yeah, no, the
Yeah,
speaking, we can land it on this.
yeah.
There's, we have a mutual friend who's English, Amit, and he said one day I was hanging out with him at Football Factory. So we're connecting all the dots here,
Mhm.
and one of his friends, who's American, we were like a group of us talking outside, and one of his friends, who I just met that day, but he's from America. He's was moving to, I believe, there's a town called Brighton in England. It's a city, really. It's not really a town. It's a big city,
Okay.
but it's on the south coast. It's not London. It's far from London. It's all the way on the south coast, right on the water in South England. And he's Emmett said everyone is going to love you there because there's no Americans that live there. Every American that moves to England either lives in like
Yeah.
in Manchester or Liverpool or London, mostly London,
Yeah.
almost exclusively London, but some of the other northern cities too. And he was like, hey, everyone is going to want to talk to you, and you're going to be like the talk of the town when you go to Brighton because there's no Americans there. So like you said, you're going to be he's going to be so unique when he goes there. So
That's what we
there's
should.
an air of mystery and intrigue as well.
Yeah, that's we
Yeah.
should do that. We should move now that you can potentially maybe in the future work remote. Like pick a European city, but like a random
Not the capital.
old like a
Yeah.
village, and just go move there because you would be like, it must be what like an A-list celebrity feels like when they go anywhere. Because yeah, you would like if you went to like a very random old, I don't know, German town or French like Parisian town that's like this old town in the middle of nowhere. You would you're right. Everyone would be like, "Yo, I want to talk to who's this guy? I want to go
Yeah.
talk
Who
to
is
this.
this guy
He's from New
exactly?
York."
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
what? And that I mean that would be pretty interesting.
Yeah, that
Um,
is a cool thing. Like what
yeah,
it's like. Remember,
yeah,
I have fantasies sometimes of being Tom Cruise in Cocktail, just moving to the Caribbean and becoming a bartender. Random,
do
just
it,
be,
do it.
just so I could be the only American there, and I'm the bartender, so
Yeah,
everyone comes and talks to me.
I mean I think that's
Yeah,
the thing now. It's like since we live in such an interconnected world, it's hard to find those places where you're the only American.
yeah,
It
like
really
yeah,
is. I mean, traveling overseas and like traveling through Asia, it's like nowadays with the internet, there are no secrets anymore. So any place that's kind of desirable, it's like everything's been gentrified in a sense. Like every the secret is out. You know, whether you're on some beach in Thailand, now it's like everything is kind of like congested with people. It's very difficult to find your little hole in the wall. Um, but if you do, just tell me. Don't tell anyone else.
yeah. That's right. Keep it on the down low. I also quick story. I have another friend
Yeah,
who
go ahead.
moved to Japan. Um, his name is Jamie. Big up JMO every time he's having the time of his life in Japan because he grew up. He always loved Japanese culture, and now he's finally realizing his dream of living and working.
What is he
He's like
doing there?
he's teaching English to
Oh, okay,
to
interesting.
children in Japan, but everyone loves him because he's an Irish guy from Massachusetts living
That's
in
awesome.
Japan. And yeah, and he's having everyone loves him. He's having the time of his life, dude. So
That
he's
takes immense courage. I give him a lot of
yeah,
credit. I mean,
yeah,
yeah, he's probably having dude. Japan is an interesting place. Like, we could talk about this another day, but yeah, like I think
yeah.
that'd be he's probably having a great time.
Oh,
He'll probably
lovely.
end up with a Japanese wife. I would imagine.
I've already picked up on it. I think he is. I think he
And
will
then
be.
it's just a
Yeah,
question of if he brings her back here or if he just never comes back.
he extended his stay,
Oh,
so
there
we'll
you
see.
go. There
He's
you go.
already It's already happening. It's already happening.
Hey, well,
Uh,
ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. This was interesting. We should do another kind of travel episode since we've all
yeah,
traveled. Maybe we get Joe because Joe's traveled to a couple
Joe
places.
travels a lot, but we could also talk about traveling in America too, to
That would
different
be
places.
that would be
We
cool.
can incorporate that too.
Hey, folks, have a good night. We will talk to you again, I guess, next week.
Salute.
Peace.
Peace.